Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk to two priests who are chaplains in the U.S. Navy, and they're priests of the Diocese of Youngstown. And joining me today is Father Michael Marcelli and Father Michael Mikstay. Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Father.
Thanks, Father Jim.
It's great to have you both on the show today. We know that there's a special collection for the U.S. military archdiocese that we'll talk about a little later on in our show. But for the folks that are with us, I think they'd like to get to know the two of you better. And so why don't we kind of start with that. Father Mikstay, I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how long you've been a priest, and how long you've been in the Navy.
I was ordained in 1981 and served in 3 different parishes before going active duty in 1992. So when I left, I was at Holy Family in Poland. And at that time, in 1990, our nation was getting ready to go to war. And so I felt a real need to respond with the numbers of people who were being activated in reserve and guard units. And when I talked to Bishop Malone, he was very supportive, and as a consequence, I came active duty in July of 1992.
Well, I want to thank you for your long service in the military, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But let's have Father Marcelli tell us a little bit about your beginnings as a young priest and also how you got involved in the Navy.
Well, Father Corda, I was ordained in 2011, and my first 3 years were spent at St. Charles Borromeo in Boardman. While I was in the seminary, I realized there was an opportunity to become a chaplain in the military. And I realized also that if I were in the military, I would want the sacraments available to me. And so this got me thinking of becoming a chaplain. Recruiters visited the seminary while I was there, and I also considered it because of that. Father Mikstay visited St. Vincent Seminary in 2007 and answered some questions I had about the chaplain corps. And when I went to St. Charles, a lot of the parishioners would ask me to pray for their children who were in the service. And so it was still, after 3 years, weighing on my heart, and I thought that this is a great opportunity to serve God and country. It was a way to, in a sense, honor my father and my brother who were both in the Navy. And I also thought it's an opportunity for adventure, for self-improvement, and so forth. And so I began the process and have been in for 2 years now.
Let's talk a little bit about life as a chaplain in the military. Both of you are stationed presently in San Diego, California. Let's talk about life there, what it's like. Is it kind of like being in a typical parish? Because a lot of the folks that are with us, their only experience of priests mainly is within their own parish. So is that similar or is it different?
Well, you know, the Holy Father said pastors need to smell like the sheep. And we in the military sometimes wonder if he got that from us first, because our effectiveness comes with being with the people we serve from the moment that they set foot in the military until sometimes we carry them off of the battlefield. I'm currently stationed at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego, and I'm probably the envy of every priest in this nation, because every Sunday I have about 800 18 to 24-year-olds for Mass. And what a blessing to hear 20 or 30 confessions each week and then celebrate the Eucharist for those men who have made the biggest decision in their life at about 18 years old to join the United States Marine Corps.
Nothing against Father Mikstay's age, but you're considerably younger. How is it relating to the young people, as he had mentioned, that are much more close to your age. How has that been?
Well, it's exciting living, and it's quite different from the parish life, living with the congregation, living with my peers. And I'm kind of in the middle. Some of the officers are about 10 years older, and some of the enlisted are about 10 years younger. So I'm kind of right in the middle, and I feel that I have a good rapport with both my peers and senior officers, as well as the rest of the Navy, all the sailors. We just returned from a 7-month deployment on the USS Boxer. And it's quite different from parish life. It's a diverse group, and is in a sense very monastic, because there is a routine, a daily routine of life. We have to at St. Charles, we had several ministry programs, and they would take care of choir, they would take care of the lectors and all the ministers. In the Navy, on a ship, that's all something that's part of my responsibility, to find readers, to find ministers, and to build a choir. And again, there's access to all people of all faiths, of all denominations, and you're working in collaboration with other chaplains of different denominations. So the Navy Chaplain Corps, accommodates and for all religions as well. So that's an exciting and a new experience.
We've got a few minutes left of our first segment. I'd like to kind of pick up on that, because I think that ecumenical spirit is really certainly part of who we are as Catholics, but probably even more so in the military. How has that been your experience with other chaplains over these many years?
Father, that's been one of the greatest joys of military life. At my rank and my years, I am now senior. And so under my responsibility are chaplains who are Jewish rabbis, who are sometimes imams. We had a Buddhist chaplain. We have Baptists. We have all sorts of mainline Protestant chaplains. One of the wonderful things about chaplaincy is that Father and I, as priests, provide for our own, and our identity as a priest, but we facilitate the ministry of many others. So sometimes in distant lands, maybe in a combat zone, I might have the responsibility for taking around a rabbi for high holy days, or an Orthodox priest for the Orthodox Easter. We work every day, in and out, without any distinction between our religions. And it's just been one of the great things that marks the military chaplaincy.
We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. So please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Whether it's passing on medicine, a blanket, or something as simple as a glass of water, that's how compassion works. And that's how Maryknoll works, hand to hand to hand. For nearly 100 years, Maryknoll's been passing on your help to the priests and brothers working in 26 countries around the world. Maryknoll, an American Catholic organization, dedicates 86 cents of every dollar donated to their programs, serving the world's poor and powerless. And that's how it works. Compassion flows from your hand to the hand of someone in need. Hand to hand to hand. That's Maryknoll.
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 Welcome back to our special edition of Spotlight. I'm talking with Father Michael Marcelli and Father Michael Mikstay. I think what I'd like us to talk about in this segment is a little bit more about your particular experiences as a chaplain in the military. Oftentimes we might hear people say, how could a priest serve in the military? We're supposed to be peaceful people, and yet there's an important role that you as a priest, as a chaplain, play. How important is that role, and how do you celebrate that in the military as a priest?
Yes. The role of a priest and a chaplain in the military is to provide moral and spiritual support, to provide counseling and encouragement. The Navy's scope is very broad. In a sense, it's to promote peace, to maintain peace and freedom throughout the world, across on the seas as well. And being in the Navy for the military, it's an excellent, wonderful education in society, life in society. They study, they work hard, they work together, and I thank God daily for being raised in a large family, because that gives me the perspective on how to live on a ship with a large family. And so there's so much more involved in the military in terms of living life in a society, getting an education, working together for a greater cause, being committed to certain core values. And that's one of the blessings that I thank God for.
Father Mikstay, I'd like us to talk about somewhat of what Father Marcelli has mentioned, but talk about how life as a chaplain is really kind of a microcosm of what the church is. You know, it's just, we're so used to parish life, we're so used to parish priests, and yet life in the Navy is really the church as well. And how do you celebrate church, and how do you let them know that they are church?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that has always remained with me when I first approached Bishop Malone about going active duty, he remarked that a certain percentage of our diocese has people in the active duty military, the armed forces. And it's right every so often that we send a priest in support of that. I would like to pick up a little bit on what Father said about our reasons. We are there for a very basic reason. Father and I raise our right hands just like any other member of the military, and we swear to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States. But the moment that we do that, he and I lose rights, as does every other person. We don't have freedom of speech. We don't have freedom of assembly. But we're guaranteed the freedom of religion. And I'm sure that most of the viewers are aware that our freedom of religion is being challenged in many arenas today. And every time chaplaincy has been challenged, it's been brought back to that very basic, fundamental, radical rationale. He and I, as every other chaplain, are there to guarantee the free exercise of religion for the people that we serve in the United States Armed Forces. As such, I've always tried to maintain the basis of that chaplaincy as my priesthood. And long after I'm being called sir, and long after I'm being called captain or any rank, I'm going to be father. And that's what I come back to. That's what I come home to.
And that's kind of basic as to who we are as priests. And yet we all function in that role, but yet we're challenged at times, depending on what our ministry is, to kind of expand that and to broaden that base. And I think it's really important for people to know that that's why we do what we do, because continually we need to be open to the Spirit, to the movement of God's Spirit within us. And I think in turn, we kind of activate people to do that as well. Let's, in our last few minutes of our middle segment, talk about some of those particular obligations and duties that are endemic to anyone as a chaplain in the military, whether it's in the Navy or the Army or the Marines, whatever that is. Why are those obligations and duties and requirements so important that you stand by those?
Some of the duties and obligations of a chaplain, they're important because religion is deeply rooted in the hearts of, I think, every human being. We are religious beings, as the Catechism tells us. Each culture is religious beings. And it's important because we can support, protect, and defend and guide everyone who comes to us, everyone we meet, in fostering that innate desire to seek God.
I'd just add to that the Marine Corps has recently come out within the last 3 weeks or so with what they call an ALMAR. It goes out to all Marines. It talks about spiritual fitness. And so as we get ready to prepare for our nation's defenses, especially battles and war, we are physically prepared, we are mentally prepared, we are emotionally prepared. And they've recently understood that this connection with the spiritual preparedness of being able to, whatever that means in terms of an individual's worth and their value, that chaplains need to highlight that, promote that, and also to make sure that that is seen as just important as any of the other things. Our nation today talks about moral injury as many of us come back from war. That resiliency, that ability to get through that, to rebound with not only self but family, with God, with church, it's alleviated by being spiritually fit. And that opportunity is just at every step of the way, from the person's initial entry into the military until we're serving on the battlefield. We are here, provide sacraments and so forth, but it all goes into that spiritual fitness which rounds out the individual in their preparedness.
Well, I think we're going to take a quick break and talk a little bit more about that in our final segment. So please stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her. Instead of sitting on the couch, I hope to clean up.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I sent my husband a love email.
What have I done for my marriage today? It's a good question.
I gave her a call and say, thinking of her. And the kids.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
We're going to the museums as a family.
What have I done for my marriage today?
I made my wife coffee and breakfast this morning.
It's going to be her birthday next week, so I've been spending time today making arrangements to make that extra special.
Oh, we're spending the day together?
I bought her an orchid.
Hassan was able to let me sleep in by taking care of him in the morning.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. She's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Small changes can make a world of difference. Get started at foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
33 million Americans have descended into poverty. And as their futures fall, so does our nation's.
Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Father Michael Mikstay and Father Michael Marcelli. You know, when we took a break, you had mentioned something that I think it's important for the folks that are with us to understand, that when you go into battle with your fellow Navy people, that you are not there as a fighter, you're there more as a chaplain, as a peacemaker. So let's explain that role explicitly for the folks that are with us, and then let's talk a little bit more about how imperative that spirituality part is really relative to what you do.
Yes. As chaplains, and as well as the medical corps, we are non-combatants. That means when we go into a combat situation, we don't carry a weapon. We have a bodyguard or religious program specialist. A B720 is the new title, and they go. So we are non-combatants, and a lot of times this also strengthens the faith of those who are around us, because they look at the chaplain and they see he's going into a dangerous situation, and his trust is in God. And I've even heard that said before, chaplain, you don't need a gun because you believe in God, you know, and so that inspires and motivates and encourages others as well.
And I think that's really a powerful weapon when you think about it, you know. And talk a little bit more, Father Mike, about how that is so spiritual and how that is driven for you and for other chaplains.
Well, I believe there's no higher thing that I can do in my ministry as a military priest than to go into combat, in my case with Marines. I've had several opportunities to do that, several opportunities to provide the sacraments, provide guidance. Just the presence of a priest is so rare that Father and I both travel extensively because wherever we go, on ship or on the battlefield, priests are so rare, so we are constantly in travel and we see many people, and we take on the opportunity to present ourselves for service, for confession, for whatever. That's been the highlight of my priesthood in the military. That spiritual role is also one in which chaplains possess something that no other person in the armed forces possesses. And that is that Father and I have absolute confidentiality. Doctors don't have it, psychologists, psychiatrists don't have it. Our nation has understood that integral to our function, we must have that ability to speak with an individual who comes to us as a spiritual guide, chaplain, so that nothing they say can be repeated, either in a court-martial or any legal proceedings. That opens up doors for people to unburden their souls. What a great nation we have that would bestow us with such a gift.
Definitely, and I think that in turn shows the folks that are with us what a great gift having priests in the military really is. For our young people, everyone has been touched in some way by having a child in the military or having some relative, and so everyone can relate to that experience. And sometimes that experience of being in the military could be a rather lonely experience, but having someone there that's kind of a spiritual guide, a spiritual director, is really heartwarming, but also consoling, not only for them, but for those back at home. We know that every several years in dioceses around the country that there's a special collection that takes place primarily for the military archdiocese. Before we actually talk about the collection, let's talk about the military archdiocese, because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that structure. So Father Marcelli, tell us about that.
Well, the Archdiocese for Military Services USA is based in Washington, D.C. Our Archbishop is Bishop Bergoglio, and he endorses us. He gives us the faculties to administer the sacraments and be a chaplain in the military, which is the largest diocese in the world because it expands the entire globe to wherever the military is. And in the Navy, we serve the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Marines, and so being a chaplain in the Navy it has access, in a sense, to the most communities in the military. But the Archdiocese for the military serves all branches of the military.
I would just mention that the Archdiocese of the military has 1.8 million members. It also includes, as Father mentioned, the other branches of the services. It also includes the Veterans Administration. So the chaplains who serve in the VA hospitals fall under the Archdiocese of the military. I would say that we have about 215 priests who are active duty at this point across all the armed forces. And the important thing to remember, as Father said, the Archbishop Broglio, the Archdiocese, endorses us. I am and remain a priest of the Diocese of Youngstown. Father Marcelli remains a priest of the Diocese of Youngstown. I belong to you. I belong to this diocese. Father belongs to this diocese. And through the good graces of, in my case, Bishops Malone, Bishops Tobin, and now Bishop Murray, we're on loan to the Archdiocese. But in a very short period of time, I'll be coming home. Father Marcelli has a ways to go.
Sure. Let's talk primarily, what does that collection fund? I think it would be important for the folks that are with us to know where their money goes.
It funds all the works that are done by the Archdiocese for the military services. We have a staff, especially in Washington, D.C. So unlike a parish that has each parish has their own staff that maintains sacramental records, that provides faculties and communication. The central base is there in Washington, D.C. And one of the many things that these funds go to is to sustain that, in a sense, that parish office that maintains the records for all the personnel, the military and their families who we serve.
Sometimes when we mention the word military, people automatically think that that is funded by the United States government. The Archdiocese, the military, receives absolutely no funding from the government. So it's all depending upon the donations of goodwill of people, faithful, of those of us who are in the Archdiocese and those outside. This is the second time we're taking the collection. It began in 2013. The United States Catholic Conference agreed that every 3 years we would take this up. So Father and I now have the wonderful benefit of coming home this weekend to speak in parishes about the collection. But once again, it is funded solely by the generosity of the people who are in our parishes and the people who are in the military.
We know that the website is up for those people who were unable to contribute recently to the collection. If over the course of time they would like to do that, they can definitely go to the website and contribute. On behalf of CTNY and the Diocese of Youngstown, I'd like to thank you, Father Michael Marcelli, Father Michael Mikstay, not only for your presence here on our special edition of Spotlight, but also for your presence in the armed forces. We thank you for what you do. Godspeed, be safe, and we look forward to your return.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Father.
And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.